Some nights you can just feel it, that sinking in your gut that something's about to go wrong. And no matter how much you try to shove it down, smile through it, pretend it's nothing. It lingers. That was me, sitting there in Jake's car, fingers nervously smoothing the hem of my favorite navy blue dress. The one he used to say made my eyes look like the ocean. It was our anniversary. 5 years married, 5 years of inside jokes, late night grocery runs, whispered promises under heavy blankets. And I was desperately hoping tonight would feel like a reset. I needed it, we needed it, but then we turned into the driveway, and there it was. Linda's car parked right in front like a monument. Beside it, his dad's old truck and Rachel's shiny white SUV. The breath left my lungs in a slow, painful sigh. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they just dropped by. Maybe it was quick. Maybe we could still escape. But even as I grabbed my purse and followed Jake to the door, I knew deep down where hope couldn't reach anymore. Jake grinned at me, that boyish smile that once melted all my doubts. I forced a smile back, clenching my fists so tight inside my coat pockets, my nails dug crescents into my palms. "Surprise," he said, pushing open the door. And there they were, all of them, smiling, laughing, waiting. For a moment, I just stood there, the cold air clinging to me like a second skin. This wasn't our night, it was their night, and somehow Jake thought I'd be happy about it. I stepped inside, the familiar smell of Linda's heavy perfume hitting me like a wave. Fake vanilla and disapproval. I smiled because that's what you do when you're the outsider, trying to fit into a family that never really wanted you. I kissed Jake's cheek, feeling the distance already growing between us, and sat down at the long dining table. The night unfolded exactly the way my heart had warned me it would. Every time I opened my mouth, Linda talked louder. Every opinion I offered was met with polite, brittle smiles from Rachel and Danielle. Every joke I made landed like a stone in water, ripples of awkward silence following. And Jake laughed with his dad. He passed dishes. He refilled wine glasses. He never once looked over at me with the eyes that used to catch mine across crowded rooms. It was like I was furniture, useful, background, invisible. I sipped my wine, letting the sweetness coat my tongue, trying to drown the ache building in my chest. After dinner, Linda practically dragged everyone into the living room for dessert. Of course, she had baked a cake, thick frosting, cloyingly sweet like every other carefully curated part of her image. I took a slice, balancing it on my knee, pretending to listen to Rachel's story about some award her kid had won, and then came the jab. Small, sharp, surgical. Linda handed me a mug of coffee and said, "I didn't know you drank coffee, Amanda. You're usually so health conscious, aren't you?" Her voice dripped with sugar and knives. It was a small thing, insignificant maybe to an outsider. But to me, it was every cold shoulder, every backhanded comment, every dinner where I had sat smiling while bleeding inside, all packed into one tiny, innocent-sounding sentence. I smiled, I nodded, I sipped the coffee, even though it tasted like bitterness itself. And then, because the universe apparently wasn't done yet, Rachel leaned back on the couch, twirling her wine glass between two fingers and said, "Jake was so much cuter before he got married." The room went silent. I could feel all their eyes on me, some gleaming with amusement, some pretending not to notice. And Jake stared at his glass. That was it, something inside me, something I had spent years holding together with tape and hope snapped. I stood up. The chair scraped sharply against the hardwood floor, a loud, ugly noise that finally cut through the pretense. "Is there something you want to say to me?" My voice trembled, not from fear, but from fury barely leashed. Linda blinked, all innocence and feigned shock. Rachel looked smug. Jake finally lifted his head, confusion and guilt warring in his eyes. "Because I'm getting really tired of pretending I don't notice." My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I didn't back down. "I'm your wife, Jake." My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. "I deserve better than this." Linda gasped, her hand flying to her chest like I had slapped her. "Amanda, sweetheart, we're just having fun. It's not personal." But it was. It had always been personal. Every slight, every jab, every moment they made me feel like loving Jake meant sacrificing pieces of myself. I grabbed my purse, feeling Jake's stunned eyes on me, and walked to the door. "Amanda, wait," he called, but I didn't wait. Not this time. The night air hit me like a blessing. I climbed into my car, slammed the door, and just sat there for a second, breathing. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my mind racing. And then, with no real plan, no clear destination, I pulled out of the driveway, driving away from the house, from them, from the version of myself who thought being polite was the same as being loved. The road blurred under my headlights, street signs, trees, houses all blending into each other as I drove without thinking, just needing to move. Away from that house, away from Jake. Away from the version of me that kept making excuses for being treated like an afterthought. I don't remember making the decision to drive to Marie's house. I just ended up there on her porch, my hands shaking so badly I could barely ring the doorbell. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't say a word. She just pulled me into a hug, the kind of hug that makes all the walls you've built come crumbling down. I broke, right there on her front steps, under the glow of the porch light, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. She held me, like she had a million times before through breakups and bad job interviews and panic attacks I couldn't explain. And when I finally pulled back, hiccuping and shivering, she just said, "Come inside." I curled up on her couch, wrapped in an old blanket that smelled faintly of her Dug and laundry soap, feeling like a hollowed-out version of myself. Marie handed me a cup of tea, not coffee, not wine. Tea, warm, gentle healing. We didn't talk much that night. She didn't push. She just sat with me, the quiet between us speaking louder than words ever could. But even in that silence, my mind was a battlefield, images of Jake's face frozen in shock, Linda's smug smile, Rachel's glinting eyes, the suffocating air of that living room over and over, replaying twisting the knife deeper. Around midnight, the text started. "Please come home. I'm sorry. We need to talk. Please don't leave me." Each buzz of my phone made my stomach clench. I picked it up. Put it down. Picked it up again. My thumb hovered over the reply button more times than I could count. Part of me wanted to answer. Part of me ached to hear his voice, to believe he didn't mean it, that it could still somehow be fixed. But a louder, steadier part of me, the part that had been ignored and belittled and overlooked for far too long, screamed, "Don't you dare!" I curled up tighter on the couch, pressing the back of my hand to my mouth to stifle the sobs threatening to escape again. How had it come to this? How had I become the woman begging, silently praying Jake would choose me when he should have chosen me without hesitation? Somewhere between exhaustion and heartbreak, I fell asleep. Morning came harsh and unwelcome. The sun streamed through Marie's living room windows, too bright, too real. I sat up slowly, my body aching in ways I didn't even understand. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another text, Jake again. "Please just talk to me." My fingers itched to answer, to tell him how much he had hurt me, to beg him to finally see me. But I didn't. Instead, I walked to the kitchen where Marie was making coffee. She smiled when she saw me, tired but patient. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out because I didn't know. I didn't know if I was sad or furious or terrified or relieved. Maybe all of them, maybe none. I shrugged helplessly, blinking back the sting in my eyes. Marie set 2 mugs down and leaned against the counter. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said. "You just have to survive today. That's enough." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat again. Survive today, just today. The thought anchored me in a strange way. Later that afternoon, after hours of pacing Marie's tiny apartment, after rereading every single text Jake had sent, I made a decision. I wasn't ready to forgive, I wasn't ready to go back, but I also wasn't ready to burn everything to the ground. Not yet. I picked up my phone and typed carefully, "I need space. If you don't understand that, maybe it's over." No frills, no apologies, no promises, just the truth. I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over send, and then I pressed it. The second the message left, my whole body sagged against the couch. Relief, fear, grief all tangled together inside me like a storm. I didn't know what would happen next. If Jake would fight for me, if I would even want him to, I just knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back to pretending everything was okay. I couldn't go back to shrinking myself into something palatable for people who would never love me the way I deserved. Not anymore. It was a strange feeling waking up and realizing that nothing had changed except for me. The world outside Marie's window looked the same. Same cars on the street, same neighbors walking their dogs, same hum of life, moving forward, oblivious to the implosion of mine. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was strength or numbness or sheer exhaustion. Maybe all 3, but I knew I couldn't keep doing what I had been doing, pretending, hoping, waiting. Later that day, Jake showed up. I heard the knock at Marie's door while I was curled up on her worn-out armchair sipping tea and staring blankly at a crossword puzzle I wasn't actually doing. Marie answered it. I heard their low voices in the hallway. And then Jake's familiar footsteps, slow, hesitant as he stepped into the living room. My heart jumped painfully against my ribs. My first instinct was to run to him, to fold into his arms, to pretend none of this had happened. But I stayed seated, grounded, steady. Jake looked awful, like he hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't known peace in days. Good, I thought bitterly. Now he knew a fraction of what it felt like to sit in a room full of people and feel completely unseen. He opened his mouth, closed it again, swallowed hard. Amanda, please, can we talk? His voice cracked on the last word, and for a second, just a second, I wanted to cry. But instead, I nodded. Calm, controlled, talk. He dropped onto the couch across from me, elbows on his knees, hands wringing together like he was physically trying to hold himself together. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't realize I just wanted everyone to get along. You thought if you ignored it, it would go away. I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. He flinched. Amanda, I love you. You know that I never wanted to make you feel like this? I stared at him, at the man I had loved so fiercely, so blindly, the man I had defended to my friends when they raised quiet concerns, the man I had convinced myself was just caught in the middle every time he failed to stand up for me. But now all I could see was every dinner where I had smiled through humiliation, every party where I had stood alone in a corner. Every night I had cried myself to sleep while Jake snored beside me, oblivious. I shook my head slowly. Words aren't enough anymore, Jake, I said quietly. You can say you're sorry all you want, but it doesn't change anything unless you show it. He nodded eagerly. Desperate, I'll talk to them, I'll set boundaries, I'll make this right. I believed he meant it in that moment, I truly did, but I also knew this wasn't the first time he had made promises. The last time his mother had insulted me at Thanksgiving, he had promised to say something he hadn't. The time his sisters jokingly left me out of a family photo, he had promised to talk to them. He didn't. Over and over, I had waited for him to choose me, waited for him to fight for me, and all I had gotten was silence. I leaned back against the chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I'm done waiting, Jake. My voice didn't shake this time. His face crumpled like I had physically struck him. Please, Amanda, give me a chance to fix this. I was quiet for a long moment. Then very carefully I said, if you want this marriage to have any chance, you need to choose. Choose, he echoed, confused. Yes. I said me or your family, because you can't keep trying to sit on the fence. You can't keep pretending their disrespect doesn't matter, not if you love me, not if you actually want a future with me. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Jake opened his mouth, closed it. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the guilt, the fear, the hesitation. And that hesitation, that split second where he didn't immediately fiercely say, you told me everything. Told me I had been right to walk away. I stood up slowly, wrapping the blanket tighter around my shoulders like armor. You think about it, I said, but know this, I'm not coming back to being invisible. I'm not coming back to a life where I'm expected to just endure it. His eyes filled with tears, but I had no tears left for him. Without waiting for his reply, I turned and walked back toward Marie's guest room, closing the door gently behind me. On the other side, I leaned against the wood, pressing my forehead against it, my heart pounding. I had just drawn a line in the sand, and for once, I wasn't the one scrambling to erase it. I wasn't sure if Jake would fight for me. I wasn't sure if I even wanted him to. But I knew one thing for certain, I was done fighting for people who couldn't or wouldn't fight for me. The days after I set that boundary with Jake felt like learning how to breathe underwater. Everything was heavy, everything was unfamiliar. There were moments, fleeting, cruel moments when I wanted to run back, when the ache of loneliness gnawed at my ribs so fiercely that I thought maybe enduring his family's coldness would be easier than facing this emptiness. But deep down beneath the fear and the sadness, there was something else growing. Something fierce, something stubborn, something like hope. I stayed at Marie's for a while. She gave me space when I needed it and company when the silence became too much to bear. Some nights we sat cross-legged on the floor, eating cheap Chinese takeout straight from the containers, watching terrible reality TV shows just to laugh at something, anything. Other nights, I couldn't laugh at all. I cried myself to sleep. I wrote angry letters to Jake that I never sent. I sat by the window at 3 a.m. clutching a cup of tea like it was the only thing tethering me to earth. But through it all, I stayed. I didn't go back. Not even when Jake sent flowers, not even when he left. Long rambling voicemails promising he had changed. I knew better now. Love wasn't supposed to feel like begging. Slowly, life began to stitch itself back together. I found a new apartment, tiny old with creaky floors and peeling paint, but it was mine. The first night I slept there on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride I was building something for myself, brick by shaky brick. I started picking up shifts at a local bookstore. Nothing glamorous, just restocking shelves, making coffee, chatting with the regulars. But it felt good. It felt real. There was something healing about the quiet hum of it all, the smell of old paper, the sound of the register, dinging the way the light spilled in through the dusty windows in the afternoon. I began setting small goals for myself. One week it was go to yoga once, even if I felt awkward. Call mom back instead of letting the call go to voicemail. Another week it was cook a real dinner, not just microwave something. Paint something, even if it looked terrible. They were small things, tiny maybe, to anyone else. But to me, they were victories. Each one a quiet rebellion against the version of myself who had stopped trying because life felt too heavy. Some days, the loneliness still crept in like a fog, like when I saw couples holding hands at the grocery store, or when I passed by the little Italian restaurant Jake and I used to love. On those days, I let myself grieve. I didn't shame myself for missing him. I didn't pretend I was over it when I wasn't. Healing, I realized, isn't a straight line. It's a messy, beautiful, heartbreaking spiral. You take one step forward, two steps back. You laugh and then cry in the same afternoon. You feel strong one moment and shattered the next. And that's okay. That's human. One afternoon, after a particularly rough day, I found myself wandering into a small art supply store downtown. The smell of canvas and turpentine hit me like a memory I hadn't painted since college, hadn't picked up a brush since life got too busy, since marriage and obligations and playing the perfect wife swallowed up every spare inch of my time. On impulse, I bought a cheap set of acrylics and a canvas. That night in my tiny living room, I painted. It was messy. It was chaotic. It didn't look like anything at all, but it was mine. Hours slipped by without me even noticing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about Jake. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was just creating, existing living. The next morning, I woke up to paint smudges on my hands and a full heart. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. I was still healing. I knew that there would still be bad days, but I also knew something else. I was strong enough to survive them, strong enough to survive anything. And I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to live. Time has a funny way of healing wounds you swore would never close. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in tiny, almost invisible moments. Moments you don't even realize are important until you look back and see how far you've come. 3 months after I left Jake, I woke up one Saturday morning to sunlight spilling through my apartment windows, birds chattering outside, and a soft, steady calm inside my chest. No panic, no heavy sadness pressing down on me, just peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from fixing everything. It was the kind that comes from realizing you don't have to fix everything to be happy. I made myself a real breakfast, eggs and toast and coffee, and sat by the window with a book, feeling the quiet hum of my new life settle around me like a warm blanket. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't miss Jake. Not the real him anyway. Maybe I missed the idea of him. The idea of partnership, of having someone to share small, ordinary moments with. But the reality, the walking on eggshells, the loneliness, even when he was sitting right next to me, the exhaustion of constantly proving my worth that I didn't miss at all. One afternoon, while browsing through the little bookstore where I worked, I met Ethan. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning bolt, no movie moment music swelling in the background. It was simple, easy. He asked for a recommendation. We laughed about how neither of us could finish a self-help book without getting distracted halfway through. He left with a paperback and a shy smile. A week later, he came back. Then again and again, it was slow, organic, a quiet unfolding. I wasn't ready to date, not really, and Ethan never pushed. He showed up, he listened, he laughed with me, not at me, he asked questions, and actually cared about the answers. It was startling to be seen, to be heard, to be valued not for what I could offer, not for how well I could fit into someone else's life, but just for being me. It scared me at first. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, kept bracing for the moment he would decide I was too much, too complicated, too broken, but it never came. Instead, there were small gestures, a coffee left on my doorstep when he knew I had an early shift, texts asking how my painting was going, notes tucked inside the books he loaned me. You deserve to take up space. You don't have to shrink here. Every little kindness from Ethan was a stitch slowly sewing back the pieces of me that had been torn apart. Jake reached out once about 5 months after I left. A short, simple text. I miss you. I stared at it for a long time, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing, just a quiet gratitude that I wasn't that version of myself anymore. The one who would have dropped everything to rush back to someone who couldn't see her worth. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Some people only realize what they had once. It's already gone. And that's not my burden to carry anymore. Today, as I sit in my little apartment sipping coffee and watching the world pass by outside, I can honestly say I'm proud of the woman I'm becoming. I'm not perfect. I'm still healing. I still flinch sometimes when memories sneak up on me, but I'm learning, I'm growing, and more importantly, I'm choosing myself every single day. Not because someone else chose me first, not because I proved I was worthy, but because I always was. If you were me, what would you have done? Would you have stayed a little longer, hoping they'd change? Would you have fought harder, waited more patiently, made yourself smaller just to be loved? Or would you I finally did choose to walk away, to choose yourself even when it's terrifying, even when it hurts, even when you have no idea what comes next, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over on your own terms, for no one else but you.